So I wanted in this final video to just devote a little attention to the little horn. Because he's so prominent in the interpretation of the second half of the chapter, and because he is going to be a very prominent figure as we continue through the next three visions within the book of Daniel, and also he's going to be a focus of some comments Jesus makes in his in his sermon, the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, Luke 21 or 22, can't remember right now, and Matthew 13. And then also the Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians will seem to refer to the little horn, although he won't call him a little horn in that context. And then, of course, the book of the Revelation, chapters 12 through 14, and actually 12 through 20. So I think the little horn is going to become very important, and it's no surprise considering he's very important here in the interpretation. He is a very, very much a focus of the interpretation in the second half, and that, of course, is because of what he does that's so unprecedented. So we see that this other horn that came up before them, before which three of them fell, okay, this little horn, we already talked about this, how that he's small, he's little, and yet he has the power to rip up three other horns. So he's stronger than any of the other horns. He just doesn't seem by his appearance to be. And I suggested already that the fact that he's little means there's a deception. Now, I think this is a deliberate deception, but it's fine if it's not deliberate. However you want to read it, doesn't matter. At this point, all that you need to say is that no one would have thought that the little horn would be the strongest of these horns and would prove to be such a threat because he's little. So no one is going to anticipate, by virtue of his size, that he's going to be of much of a threat. So I see that as a deception. Okay, so the first thing I think is that he is deceptive. And then, of course, he has eyes which speak of his intelligence, and his mouth also, his intelligence, boasting. So he's obviously strong, he's powerful, he's arrogant, he's clever, he has intelligence, and I think he's a deceiver. All right? And you probably might think this reminds you of that figure in the garden, that one beast that was in the Garden of Eden, who was also clever and arrogant and much stronger than he seemed, inasmuch as he appeared like a little snake. Now, you have to remember that the animals were subject to Adam and Eve. They had dominion over the animals, and the animals were deferential to them. They didn't fear humans, according to Genesis chapter 9. Then they did start to fear humans after the flood. But before, in the Garden of Eden, it's as if they don't have any great fear of humans. And so the serpent is an inferior, in other words, an inferior creature to the humans, and seems to be less of a threat. And yet, it can talk. Now, the other animals can't talk. It's not Narnia. Noah isn't having conversations with the animals as he brings them onto the ark, right? This serpent, this snake, can talk. He has intelligence. Why can he talk? He can talk because he's taken of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he's sort of proof that it can make you intelligent and so on. So you see how the serpent is deceiving. He's clever in the sense that he's deceptive. He's wily. And he uses his inferior position relative to Adam and Eve so that he doesn't seem like he's much of a threat. And that's all a deception. So anyway, this little horn is deceptive, and he's arrogant, and he's clever, and obviously powerful. But he also, notice this, it says he made war with the saints and prevailed over them. Now, the holy ones, some think the holy ones, the saints, is referring to angels, and that's a possibility. And others think it's referring to the believers in God, the Israelites, God's people. All right? I think it's referring to people because when this chapter talks about the dominion of God, it gets entrusted to the people. And I already missed it. Here it is here. The saints, the holy ones here of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess it forever and ever. Why have I still missed the reference? The one reference I'm trying to find, of course, I can't find at the moment, that he is... So how am I missing this? It's not really clear. Oh, because I didn't go far enough. That's why. He is given, the dominion is given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High. So I take this, the people of the holy ones, meaning the holy ones are the people. Okay, so that's why I think this is the people that the horn has made war against. In other words, he's persecuting the Israelites, the true believers in God at this stage of history, which I think will be a final stage of history. These are the people of God getting persecuted and actually losing to the power of the little horn. Okay, he's that dangerous to the world that for a time he's able to persecute and control and actually prevail over the people of God. And God allows it. But, that's right, there's one other thing we should mention, which is that he seeks to change the times and the law. All right? So, this is right here in verse 25. He thinks to change the times and the law. And this is a reference back to Daniel chapter 2. You can go back and look at it. I probably can't find it anyway tonight. But I was having a hard time locating my passages. But the idea of changing the seasons, the times, and the law means like the deep law, like I think the laws of nature and so on. So that only God, you and I can't say, hey, how about if next year, why don't we move winter into July? We don't have the authority or the power to do this. We wouldn't even think to do this because that's power that only God has. We humans, as powerful as we are, aren't just changing, the Earth's orbit, where we are in our orbit around the sun. Only God can control this, ultimately. So, but this little horn thinks he can control the fundamentals of nature itself, is the idea, right? It's an arrogant sense of how much power he really has over the world. And then the other thing we learned is the limit. He rules, this power is given into his hand, and the persecution of the God's people is given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. Now, the book of the Revelation interprets this very clearly as 3.5 years. You can go look at it in the book of Revelation, chapter 12. Is it chapter 11? Chapter 12? Can't remember right now. But time, times, and a half a time. In other words, one time is a year, 2 times is 2 years, and then half a time. But obviously the phrase is somewhat ambiguous in Daniel, but it clearly means a limit. It has, the little horn is given power, but for a limited time. And the idea that there's time, and then there's times plural, and then there's half a time, it conveys the idea that his time is cut short. You see, it's cut shorter than anything he thought, I guess, is the idea. Whatever his plans were, they're cut way short. Okay, so that seems to be the idea, that he's so powerful, so arrogant, so opposed to God and God's people, and has so much control over the world, that God himself actually intervenes and cuts his time short in order to judge his government and his empire and the beast that he comes out of, and then turn the government of the world over to that divine figure who comes like a son of man, the one that Jesus himself referred or applied to himself. All right, so that's all the emphasis on the little horn and this unique, unprecedented figure. who I think it seems clear enough, at least for me, that he's at the end of history. Now we're going to turn to chapter 8. And remember that we have chapters 8 and chapter 3 are parallel. Okay. Now, yes, it's also true that chapters 7 and 8 are pair, right? Because we have vision of 4 beasts, vision of 2 beasts. And we'll definitely get into how those things sort of work together as a pair. But for now, what you want to be thinking more about is chapter 3. And what happened there? Remember, that was the story about Nebuchadnezzar's giant golden image. He commanded all those in his government to bow down to them, including Jews, bow down and worship his image. And Daniel, not Daniel, but his friends, because Daniel, we don't know where he was, not in the story, but they refused to worship that image. And then we get to chapter 8, and it's this vision of 2 beasts. It's not just one beast. It's not just one giant image or anything. But what's similar about these 2 visions, and what's different? And then, of course, this question I'm going to ask is, what is being critiqued in chapter 8 in that vision? What is being critiqued? And how does it relate to the critique from chapter 3? So that takes a little bit of work. All these questions, this is not something you just do in 10 minutes. I mean, the goal of this reading guide series, just a reminder as you get into some harder stuff, that it is hard, that it does take time to read and then to read again and to read again, and then maybe your own self creating a document where you put the 2 chapters side by side and highlight things and draw arrows, things that relate to one another. But don't forget, when you're doing that, don't just get stuck in the weeds, connecting this word and that word and this word and that word. Make sure you're paying attention to the big picture in the big way, what this story is about here versus this story about here. Don't lose sight of the big picture as you do that. So best wishes, and we'll see you next time.